What's up, everybody? It's Coach B, BeLegendary.coach, CEO and founder, host of the Everything Matters podcast. I'm doing something a little bit different today. I just wanted to get on here and just have a conversation, really a conversation with myself, and love to have you all engage in the comments and share what your experiences have been and what your stories are. I'd love to interact with you there. But I wanted to talk about something that I think we all can gain value from. And ironically, the conversation is around value in particular and how to illustrate your value in a way that can help mitigate you from being what people may call rift or eliminated from your particular role or job. This is something, going through this process is not something that's taken lightly. It's not easy for anyone. Me being as skilled and trained and as developed as I am, I'm a human being as well. You know, I have part ego, I have pride, I have confidence in things that I do, and have a lot of, I give a lot of value to what I do and what I provide and what I give of myself to others. But in similar human regards, I'm the same as a lot of people, right? We all deal with a lot of the same stuff. So when you go through something like this, it certainly impacts you. The only difference in me and most other people is that I've trained myself and I have a lot of the tools and resources to be able to get off of it, recognize what actually happened, and I can separate the stories that my mind wants to tell me from what actually happened, and I can keep myself in a stable place, right? I can make a choice to not give those human elements power, not to give my thoughts power, not to give my feelings power, because feelings can be very misleading, and I can just get myself off of it and keep moving forward. So that's probably what sets me apart from most people. But there are a lot of people that also have the ability to do this as well. I can get off it a little bit quicker than most people, but I have my days. So, what the ego wants to say, it wants to blame, it wants to point fingers, it wants to say what was done wrong and who did wrong and all these kinds of things, right? It wants to disempower. It wants to take away your ability to choose, and it wants to take away your being responsible or looking to see where you can be responsible for whatever took place, right? So I look at it as, hey, the event that happened is that a company makes a decision and says, hey, we no longer need your services, or we're going to part ways, or we don't see a need for your role anymore. Hey, you're not cutting the mustard. We're going to go with someone else, right? Think about professional athletes. In fact, there's a draft that just took place. The NFL draft just took place last week, and lots of hype around that. The Shedeur Sanders story was polarizing, and I have some thoughts on that maybe I'll share in a future podcast. But even that right there are going to be hundreds of kids. There were hundreds of kids who actually did not get drafted in those 3 days of the draft, 7, 8 rounds or whatever it was. And a lot of those guys were able to sign undrafted free agent contracts with different teams around the country. Now, it's going to be an uphill battle for those kids to make that team. And to be 21, 22, 23 years old, going through that process and being rejected, right? I mean, you got spring rookie mini camps coming up real soon. Those guys are going to be in mini camp having to try to prove themselves that they're worthy of a slot on a 53-man roster as a rookie. A lot of those guys come in, they'll play special teams and things like that. Not a huge salary, but rookie salary is not bad. They won't miss any meals. Let's put it that way. But a lot of those guys are going to go through a lot of rejection, and a lot of, questioning themselves. They've worked so hard to get to this point, and they're at a place now where they're like, man, it's either make it or break it, right? Either I make this team or I don't. And if I don't, man, I got to go figure out what to do with my degree, to go back to school to get my degree, finish it up, or, get a job, as Tom Brady said, I thought I was going to have to go be an insurance salesperson, right? And I mean, those are real facts that those kids are going to have to deal with. And so we deal with that also on a professional level as well, when you put yourself out there for something and you give a lot of yourself. And, we also deal with the same kind of disappointment, much like they do. So what are some of the things that I've learned and some of the insights that I've taken away that I want to share with you today around this? I would say probably one of the first things is the importance of demonstrating and illustrating your value whenever you have the opportunity to do that. Don't wait for anyone else to ask you or to get yourself in a position where you now have to, sort of on your heels, show your value, illustrate your value. Keep in mind that people are in their own worlds. When someone hires you, they are hiring you for a specific goal, for a specific result or outcome for you to produce for them, right? I think about one of my first mentors, sales training and development mentors, Frank. This is years ago. God rest his soul. He passed away some years ago. But Frank said to me, and it's always stuck with me, he said, Bradford, he said, man, price is what you pay. Value is what you get. And that always resonated with me. So when you think about what an employer pays you or compensates you for what you do, there's a monetary value to that, right? But what do they get for what they paid you? And that's the value piece. And you don't necessarily determine value. It doesn't matter how skilled you are or how great you are at what you do. If the people who are in power don't see the value that you actually bring to the organization and the impact and the results that you're able to produce, it doesn't matter when the rubber meets the road. So it's important that you keep yourself out front, that you gather the metrics and the data and whatever it is they want to see. How do they see value? As a value selling facilitator, a certified facilitator, one of the things that we teach is that, value is in the eye of the buyer. And it's the same thing with the employee-employee relationship. Value is in the eye of the employer, right? It's your job to find out what they value and then demonstrate it exactly the way they want to see it. Same with the customer. You find out what the customer sees as value first. What's the outcome they want to realize? What's the return on investment they'd like to see? And then whatever that is, I want to be able to articulate that in a way that resonates and lands with you so that you continue to see my value and you continue to keep my paychecks coming, right? So what are some ways you can do that, right? And I sort of thought about this because, you give of yourself so much and sentiment is one thing. Like you may have people that are around you that working within your team that see your value in a major way. And that's my situation. I had tons of teammates that reached out to me and said, man, I can't believe this is crazy. I wonder what it means for me because you just were the difference maker, man. You just made things so much better. Like you made everybody around you so much better. But that doesn't mean anything when it comes to, again, who's in power, who's making these decisions from a strategic standpoint, right? So that's important, however. Not saying that it's not important. The sentimental piece is important, but there's also a data piece that's important that you need to be able to show. A lot of these senior leaders and executive leaders are looking for numbers and data that you can attach to your value and it's to help you paint a picture for what metrics you're able to impact for the business, right? If you're in a revenue supporting role, as myself in areas that I work in is supporting revenue and helping drive revenue to the org. If you're in that sort of role, it's really important that you know how to package your value in a way that it can communicate over to people who are in power. Because when it comes down to it, you may not have a direct connection to your chief revenue officer. You may not have a direct connection to your CEO or to your CFO or people that are in these executive meetings. So when someone pulls up a screen or a dashboard, how do you attach yourself and the work that you've done to the outcomes? And this is very difficult from a revenue enablement standpoint because there's a lot of things that you do, a lot of things that you produce in terms of programs and sessions and decks and pitch decks and, battle cards and playbooks. There's all these things that you develop and create for the revenue team. And a lot of times you can get lost in that. No one can attribute the uplift or the uptick in revenue to something that you produced. I mean, you produced 5 things. How do we know which one of these things actually moved the needle? For me, when it comes to coaching, it's even more difficult because, if I don't get credit for a deal that someone specifically won and they say, man, Coach B helped me win this deal, I don't get credit for that, right? They may not even make the connection to something that happened in a session with us, something that I said, something that landed, something that they got an insight or an aha moment they had in that session and that connects to a deal that they closed 2 weeks later. They completely forgot about the session that we had 2 weeks ago and what they got out of it. So if, again, they don't make the connection, how's the connection get made? Well, where I can be responsible is I need to log that deal, log that opportunity, and when it closes, say, hey, and package it in a way to where I am very assertive and upfront about how I demonstrate and how I show, hey, I had a hand in this particular opportunity. We talked about this. We did a deal analysis on this. We found a few gaps. We set up an action plan on things for them to do next to go close those gaps. They did that, executed on it, and the deal closed. If I don't advocate for myself to show that that's what actually took place and that I had a hand in driving that revenue across the finish line, I don't get credit for it. Now I put myself in a position where my value is not being seen and I could potentially be in trouble of losing my job. So that's one way to do it is how do you illustrate that? To make sure that you're attached to it. Another way is to it's kind of a continuation of that is to make sure that you have a space set up on a consistent cadence where you can actually show this to your manager so that they stay present to what you're actually doing, right? Not just what you're producing, but what you're actually causing to happen in terms of outcomes that's contributing to revenue. You want to make sure that they are completely clear and aware of that. So I would say don't wait till your annual cadence to do this or your quarterly cadence. Maybe set up a monthly cadence with that individual to set that up, right? Some kind of a format that you have it in to show, hey, here's 10 deals that I touched. Here's 10 customers that I touched or whatever, and here's the outcomes of those. Here's the renewal rates. Here's here's how much we were able to increase price and how much more revenue we were able to bring in and profitability we were able to bring in. Like any of those things that you can show for that person and have it documented on paper protects you so that you can show that. The third thing I'll add is being multi-threaded. This is also a value selling term. Just like you want to be multi-threaded with a customer or a prospect, what multi-threading means for you, for those of you who are not in a revenue space, multi-threading means having connections and finding different ways and different stakeholders within that organization to interweave connections with, so that if one connection falls away, you've got 2, 3, 4 others who also are on the same page, who are speaking the same language, who see the same vision that you do and that all these other stakeholders do. So if that one falls out, you still got 3 or 4 that are still connected that can keep that deal alive if that one person may leave the company, right? So multi-threading is key. I wasn't multi-threaded in my most recent opportunity because the people who had the vision for having a coaching culture and having an in-house coach being a part of that organization, they all left. The people that hired me and had this vision for this high-performing culture, coaching culture, they left. And some of them left them voluntarily, and others left because their services weren't needed anymore. For whatever the reasons were, they were gone. So I had no layer between me and senior and executive leadership, right? So I was working to create this sort of pathway for myself without a lot of support to do that. Where I can be responsible going forward and where I intend to be responsible is to make sure that those inroads are made for myself, that I'm continually multi-threading myself, with not just my manager, but with his or her manager and his or her manager's manager, right? To make sure that everyone knows and is present to what I do, how I do what I do, and the impact that I make. So those are just a few key takeaways that I got, and like I was talking about the whole real estate burn down, man, I want to tell this last story and I'm out of here, but going through that whole situation, I had no idea what was really going on, right? Because when you're inside of an organization as an employee, right, you're only privy to certain information, right? You may, if you're a public company, you might have access to certain earnings. And if you have an executive team that's relatively transparent, but they're not going to tell you everything, but they're relatively transparent about things, you might have some insight about what's happening. But the company that I was with, this is years ago, this is during the 2008, 2009 real estate mortgage meltdown. I don't know what you want to call it. It was a boil down or whatever. It was the most horrible thing I've seen in my life outside of 9/11. That was probably the worst. But that was 2001, and then this whole mortgage crisis happens in 2008, 2009. I mean, this is a decade of chaos in the United States, and we're continually in chaos. I'm just saying. But that was crazy because I'm working as an area sales manager in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was one of the last sales managers that they held on to. We had really strong production. I mean, we had a good 5-6 years of just ongoing production. We were closing 16, 17, upwards of 20,000 homes a year as an organization. This is a national builder that I worked with at the time. And I remember being in Charleston and being inside of it, like I was saying a moment ago, being inside of it, you don't really realize what's happening. I mean, you might see sales slow down, but I wasn't looking at it from a national perspective. I was only looking at it from a local perspective in my market, right? 2 markets that I was working in, Charleston and Hilton Head. But I had no idea what was really going on until I watched the movie The Big Short, and I'll get to that in just a second. So we sat in on a meeting. I remember sitting out with our division vice president and other revenue leaders and team leaders in the organization there, and them showing us on a graph how sales have declined over the last 2 years. And we went from 17, 18,000 homes in a year to about 6,000 or 7,000 closings in homes in a year. Obviously, with that sort of revenue decline, you're going to have rifts. And we had already had multiple rifts across the country in that organization. You got real problems when salespeople start getting let go. I mean, that's a strong indicator that you should probably start to bail. When they start letting salespeople go, that ain't good, because salespeople are the tip of the spear. They're the drivers of revenue. They drive everyone else's paycheck. And if you're letting salespeople go because you don't have enough sales coming in for them to actually manage and go close and make commissions, you got problems that are way bigger than anything you could imagine, right? So I learned that during that period of time. It was very, very insightful. So, but when I watched the documentary, The Big Short, if you haven't watched it, go watch it. The Big Short. If you were around during that time, The Big Short showed me from the outside looking in to see what was really happening. Because when I looked at that movie and that documentary, I saw things that I did see when I was in the business, but I didn't see it that way. When you look at empty neighborhoods and construction equipment and lumber, trusses, sheetrock, just sitting out there getting wet and just rotting away because builders are no longer able to construct and build homes anymore. We had too many foreclosures. I mean, it was crazy. So many homes coming back on the market. And honestly, even when I was in sales, before I got into sales leadership, I remember some of the loans that we were giving out to people that were highly, highly questionable. But I'm a salesperson, right? And I'm like, making my commission. I mean, it's their job to pay their mortgage, not mine. I saw people get mortgages that if you had a chicken or a dog, or if you had 3 feet, I mean, it didn't matter. Anything they would give a loan to. If you had a pulse, you could get a mortgage loan. It was insane. Like no doc loans, no documentation, no income documentation. You had to show you had a job. It was crazy. So nothing about that could be good, right? I mean, like this, no credit checks. I mean, like how did something like that sustain? And it wasn't intended to sustain. And we found out later through that movie that it was a conspiracy. It was an inside thing that was working with the bankers. They knew these loans were going to collapse. And I mean, we sold loans that people would have fixed interest rates for the first 2 to 3 years. And then after that, that rate would go up. Well, the people couldn't afford the payments once the rates went up. And that was a bad deal. They should have never been in those loans, especially people who are already borderline for qualifying. But anyway, I say all that to say because I was on the inside looking out, which was different, very different view than being on the outside looking in through that documentary. And it's very similar to being in a role in an organization where you're on the inside looking out. You got to open up new ways for you to look outward into that organization, to look beyond your team, beyond your leader, and really begin to multi-thread yourself and make sure that you are present, available, visible to the people, and also not just you, but the impact that you actually make on the business strategic growth goals and objectives is so key. So that's all I wanted to share with you on that. Hopefully you found something here that was helpful for you. That will be something you can put in your quiver and use later on down the line to help you be able to demonstrate your value in a powerful way and an effective way to help you mitigate being in a riff. All right, take care, everyone. We'll see you soon.